I'm live. Hi. I wonder if anyone will tune in. I wanted to tune in myself so I can monitor the chat with my computer. So I'm going to do that before I start talking. Let's see if I can. Live now. There we go. And I want to add that to my. Now. There we go. Oh. Let's just mute that, shall we? New. Press Alt key to pause the chat, then point to a message to delete it, block the user, or take other actions. Let's know how this works from you. Got it. All right then. So, not that I have to worry about chat, and I guess I add this to a playlist after it's done. I have to remember to don't look at the screen, but look at the tiny little dot beside the screen, which is where your eyes are. It's hard enough. It's hard enough when as an autistic when it's someone's face, but actually it's easier with a camera. They say your eyes are the windows to your soul. This is a very mild nicotine vape. I find it really helps with my nerves. I actually took it up. I had quit smoking for a good 10 years and I took up vaping for my nerves, literally. I started with a Nicorette inhaler. That was okay, but it wasn't very satisfying. But this has all of everything I've ever wanted in a cigarette when I was a smoker. It's got the edge on the back of the throat that first appealed to me. It's what makes most people cough, but for me, for some reason, it's like scratching an itch. It's got the it's got flavor, and I love that I can choose the flavors, and it's not tobacco flavor. It's got the smoke to play with, and of course there's the nicotine hit for your nerves. And you can decide for yourself how strong you want it. And lastly, you don't stink up your house and you don't get bad breath. And of course there's no cigarette butts, ashtrays, nicotine stains. I love it. It's cheaper too. It's not the nicotine that's the problem with smoking, it's all of the stuff in the smoke. So, back onto the subject. I'm not going to name names, so you know the name of the company, I'm sure, by now. I mean, they research your ancestry. What the heck could they be called? There's probably more than one, but this is the one that I see the ads for all the time. And every time, because I always was curious about my own DNA ancestry. You know, like, what's my heritage? And I used to be, you know, it's kind of racist, really, to worry about which races and nations, you know, like, and it was always ethnocentric. But I often thought, I wonder if there's someone from Africa in that mix, because it was interesting. It has to do with family history. And an aunt of mine actually did research our family tree, and the short form of it is, from what I know of my family tree, father's side comes from the military. They were the king's men way back in time, so the royal guard. And so that makes them both wealthy and uptight, extremely uptight. And because of that uptightness, my grandfather broke with the family. He was in an arranged marriage, as they still did at the beginning of the 20th century. And I think it might have been the late 19th century that he got married. I'm not sure. If my father was born in the 30s, then it would have been the early part of the 20th century. I'm just noticing my fish. He's having a nap on the bottom of the bowl, and I'm not sure that's good or bad. Maybe that's normal with these fish. Anyway, don't worry, I'll Google it later. I think I might need to change his water. It looks okay, but maybe it's not. So my father's father broke with his arranged marriage and instead married a woman he loved. But he didn't marry her because he was not allowed to divorce, because in those days, both parties had to agree to a divorce, or you had to have something on the other person. So if a woman wanted to divorce her husband, she really had to prove that he'd done something specifically against their vows, like infidelity or pretty severe abuse. And in fact, for a long time, if you were being abused, the upshot of it was that you were doing something wrong in your marriage. I'm going to just shift this. The clamp that holds the phone in the stand is resting on the volume knobs there. And now that it's moved, it's actually easier for me to look at it. I've got it set on a 1910 tripod with a cell phone clamp, and I'm using my cell phone for this camera, and it's plugged in and sitting on the table. So my father was born outside of the bounds of legal marriage, which made him social outcast, and his family were a social outcast. And so we were not part of this fancy family. But the military upbringing did cause my grandfather to be really hard with his son. And of course, you know, he was raised by Victorians, although it was not England, it was Holland. But he was raised in that milieu of, you know, spare the rod, spoil the child, and self-discipline, and everybody must pull their own, and you have to make yourself worthy of your existence. That, thank God, that's going away. That is such a cruel thing to do to a child. And so that's my father's side of the family. His parents finally did marry many years later, but by then the damage of his childhood was done. Of course, the Nazi invasion of Holland really put a kink in the whole, you know, experience. He was in his teens when that happened, and so that changed his childhood again, made it even harder. My dad was a tough man. On my mother's side of the family, the research was done, and it turns out that there's a piece of paper in the books where King William of Orange, William the First, I think, had forced a chambermaid to sign away any right to inheritance of the throne for her child, which was an offspring of the king. And if you know anything about history, it's perfectly normal in those days for a man to be unfaithful to his wife, which is really the funny thing when that's one of the requirements for divorce, is to prove it. I don't know. If you're a king, it's okay. You can get away with it, I guess. If you're powerful enough, you get away with it. That's not news. So, royal on one side and royal on the other side. It's no wonder I'm so picky. And so full of myself. So, I already know that ancestry, more or less. The other side, oh yeah, so it's Dutch all the way, except there's a little French and German. And if there's any others in there, then that would have just been the mixture together, you know. A Moor traveler comes through and has a child, takes a wife. A woman taken from the Arabians. There's so many different ways that people traveled. I would be shocked if we had Asian ancestry, but you know, Genghis made his way well into Europe and into Germany. So you could very well have Asian blood in the German stream. Wouldn't Hitler have loved DNA? So this is why people get their DNA done. It's interesting. They want to know, and it's their family history. It's the makeup of who they are, and it's also human history, because when you do that, you start understanding a little better the migration of humans, the intermixing, the way that we've been traveling forever. We spread ourselves across the globe, and there's a little bit of everybody in all of us. So that part's good. But it's not what I titled this. I didn't title Why You Should Get Your DNA Done. I titled What's Wrong with It? Why shouldn't you? Every time I see this, I think, you want a sample of my DNA on file. There's a giant file on the internet with DNA set profiles for millions of people. There are giant files on the internet with medical profiles, income profiles, opinion profiles, social media profiles. Let's face it, we're well known. If you ever want to be seditious, they'll get you real quick. I've watched so many science fiction movies where They predict what people are going to do, and on that basis, arrest them before they can do it. Now, where have we been seeing in the modern age people being found guilty before they've been tried? Rotterdam will confiscate your clothes if they don't think you look wealthy enough to own them, unless you can provide a receipt on the spot proving you bought those clothes. Now, sure, after they've taken your clothes and you've walked home in your underwear, it's Holland. They're not that bad about nudity. They may well take that too if your underwear looks too expensive. You can then return to the police station with your receipts and prove it's your clothing, but they have already sent you home naked for thinking you can't afford your clothes. Like maybe if I, for instance, put on one of my fancy bits of jewelry or my fancy bits of clothing with all of my ratty-tatty stuff, because I like to mix it up. I've got some fancy bits and I got some ratty stuff, and I really can't afford fancy clothing. But the thing is, if you take care of your clothing, it can last a long time. And if you buy classic, it can look just as new. It can look pretty new down the road. And especially bought at a thrift store. Sometimes people throw stuff out that was expensive that they decided they didn't like, or maybe someone else took it out of the closet before they had a chance to wear it and sent it to the thrift store to punish them for buying it. You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of ways that a person who's poor can get a nice article of clothing. But you don't get to go to court about it. You can get your clothes back later, but you still get sent home naked. And that's a tip of an iceberg that we worry about. There are the media and the American political system lately has been judging people without trial, trying them in the court of public opinion. And, you know, some are getting away with murder and some are getting away with nothing. Not getting away with nothing. So there you are. Your DNA profile, just like a criminal, is now accessible. Now, we can talk about privacy, and we can talk about hacking, and we can talk about court. But it only takes a court warrant to get that information. So, let's say the police have a crime scene, as in somebody has broken into an office and stolen some files or released some animals or done a sit-in at a national government office. Let's say it's something like that. I don't want to do murder and stuff. I want to do something that's socially aware and socially active, where a person is trying to force change in a world that doesn't want to listen. Change that's moral and ethical and right, okay? That's the scenario we're going to go with. But those who are moral and ethical and right are not in control of the rules, as is very, very common these days, that unethical, immoral people are getting in charge. So there's your setup. The police, therefore, are charged and tasked with finding you. And you were at the scene of the crime. Maybe. Well, in this story, you were actually guilty. But, you know, you could very well just resemble someone who was actually guilty. You know what I mean? Or have hung out with them, or maybe dated them. So they found DNA at the scene of the crime, and they have found imagery that's fuzzy and indistinct. So they get a search warrant to retrieve results that match the DNA profile they have from the scene of the crime. And they go to the DNA company and say, do you have a profile that matches this? If you do, you should surrender it to us. And being a legal company, like any bank or any other legal company, they will surrender that profile if they have one that matches. And there you have it. Now they've got DNA proof of you. Whereas before, they could not match your DNA unless they put a warrant on you for your blood and have to take a DNA sample from you. But you've already given one. You've given one to a commercial company. You have given your DNA to a commercial company. You have given your likes and preferences and interests and hobbies and shopping habits to a private company. You have given your birth date and all of that to private companies. You've given a lot of information into the hands of private corporate interest. And any one of those can be subpoenaed with a warrant to surrender that information in spite of your privacy laws. There are ways around those privacy laws. So it's like a girl who sends a naked picture of herself to someone. She created that picture herself. She wasn't snuck up on and someone took a picture when she wasn't looking. Yes, that happens. But I'm talking about what you've surrendered voluntarily for social media and for personal curiosity. What she might have surrendered is in that photograph where she just did it for approval because she really wants that boy to like her, because her social status is so tightly bound up in who thinks she's attractive. And this is a really cute boy that all the girls like. You know what I mean? But she created that evidence. She created it. Those kids that are smoking a bong on camera because it's going to be legal in a few months, but it isn't right now. They created that evidence. If for whatever reason the government decides to do a flip-flop on the opinion of smoking those bongs, those kids are in trouble. That evidence is out there. It's easy, and it very often is public already. All privacy already released via the clicking I accept at the bottom of an unread contract that says anyone can use it, and that includes the government. They can use it. This video, anything I do and say in this video is admissible in a court of law. So that's why I tell you, don't do the DNA profile. Do a regular family tree history search. In fact, you can hire people to do that for you. And they use the documents that are already on public record to trace. They use the names, they use family Bibles, they use family history records. Do a traditional family tree history. Because when you submit your DNA, you have now submitted the last essential piece of you. You've already told everybody your first and last name. Oh wait, I haven't told anybody my last name online. There are plenty of people that know it. And yes, plenty of corporations that know it. Like Amazon knows my last name. ThinkGeek knows my last name. God, I love that store. ThinkGeek.com. Awesome stuff. That's where I got this amazing thing, which I should have turned on for you. It's going to run itself through its test pattern. A lot of these people, they know my last name, they know my home address, but for the most part, I've kept that information private. Even when I get the location tags on YouTube videos, I always switch them from my neighborhood to my city, hoping that it's just going to tag my city of Saskatoon and not tell you exactly how to get here. I think a dedicated stalker could find my house, you know, come on in, we'll have tea. Be threatening? I'll kick you out. It's real simple. Be friendly? We could be friends. I thought my husband was a stalker when I first met him, and he left me a little bit concerned. I was like, geez, he's obsessed with me. And then I thought, well, I'm looking for a husband. If I can stand him, one who's obsessed with me is going to be a pretty good bet. So, you know, if this goes all the way to marriage, well, obsessed with me? Okay, that's fine. You want that in someone romantic, whereas you wouldn't want that in a stranger you don't want anything to do with. And I can handle strangers I don't want anything to do with. I know how to talk to them, and I'll get to know you before I decide that, because I'm not judgmental that way. And if you strike me as somebody who's just going to waste my time and energy, I know how to handle that too. And if you look like someone who's going to murder me, hey, I'm suicidal. This is not a bad thing. I don't think, I don't worry about getting murdered in my bed. I don't worry about getting injured or raped or attacked. That can happen from a stranger on the street just as easily as it can happen from a stranger on the internet. It's all the same. You know, security is security. Protecting yourself is protecting yourself. So why shouldn't you do the DNA? I don't think nobody's commenting, so that's okay. Why not to do the DNA? Well, you've already given enough information to the internet and to the government and to private industry. Do you really need to give your specific, unique profile? Anyone can get tattoos to match me. You can argue that it's not me. DNA, my fingerprints aren't on record either. I haven't been fingerprinted. Wait. Do they fingerprint for the passport? No, I've never been fingerprinted. My DNA isn't out there. My fingerprints aren't out there. Unless I break the law, it's going to remain that way. So I am left with the choice open to break the law. I still have the choice to break the law and to not get caught. And we want people to be able to break the law. I know you're all for law enforcement, and what are laws there for if people can break them? Well, in the first place, people are breaking them all the time. When's the last time you walked all the way to the end of the street to cross it? That's jaywalking. Or how about some very public figures right now getting away with some very public misbehavior, and they're not getting arrested, they're not getting investigated. We all know that the laws get broken constantly. And we know that we've got to enforce them. And I'm all for it. But at the same time, here's the thing. A society is only as free as its ability to defy an unjust law. See, we want to live in a free society. But in order to do that, it requires constant maintenance. You can't just sit back and say, my society's free. Get me my jet ski. I'm going to go for a vacation. That's fun and all that, but you have to stay on top of it, because Barnum said there's a sucker born every minute. Well, there's also a predator born every minute. There's someone out there who's trying to take over your free society and enslave you. And there's not just one of them. They get together in groups. They're like birds of a feather flocking together, and they sit in their little rooms with their little fireplaces and their cigars and their beers or whiskeys or whatever it is, and they plan how to take over your free society and take it away from you. They're constant. They've been there constantly. They are constantly going. And we've all heard the conspiracy theories. We all know by now that there is a cadre of what my husband's calling multinationals. People who are, we used to call them jet setters. People who are able to move around the globe at will and pick and choose homes at will because they are so wealthy. And they like their wealth and they want to keep their wealth. And there's more to it for them than wealth. Well, for them, taking over your free society so that they can remove resources and energy out of that society to hold on to for themselves, this is a constant ongoing battle. And when they gain control of your government, and they frequently do, and in a democratic society, they often get pushed back out, and then they come back in, and they get pushed out, and they come back in. And I've got another rant about that, about how they manipulate the elections to get themselves in power when the economy's good, and out of power when the economy's bad. Well, these folks, they come in, and they can make an unjust law. An unjust law might be something like, you're not allowed to smoke marijuana. You're not allowed to let it grow in the ditch. We're going to spend a ton of money eradicating the plant from, doing species removal of an entire species of plant because you enjoy it too much. Seriously, it was about that. There was absolutely no reason to demonize marijuana except people like it, and it chills them out. It helps them sit back and go, your restrictive rules are stupid. It actually makes anarchists out of some people. I mean, I've never met a marijuana smoker that had a completely closed mind, or that was completely obedient to rules. So it threatens the social order. So it's an unjust law made for unreasonable purposes. And that's why it's falling all over the place. Very quickly, we're discovering that all of those things that, Herbert Hoover and company invented about what was so wrong with it, and just say no to drugs and the war on drugs. Marijuana isn't the same as the drugs, and it isn't a gateway drug, and other than inhaling smoke, seems to be pretty harmless. And there's so many nice ways to have it instead of inhaling smoke. So it's a good medicine. So there's an unjust law. And by defying it repeatedly, we've been able to prove that it's an unjust law. Other examples of unjust laws might have been the Vietnam War draft, and refusing to be drafted, refusing, burning their draft card was a way of defying an unjust law. So if they were unable to defy it in the first place, in spite of the consequences, as in being arrested before they'd done anything, there would have been no way to communicate with people that the law was unjust and hurting people. And so a society is only as free as their ability to defy an unjust law. There will be consequences and penalties for defying it, but A, they shouldn't be too onerous, especially when no lives are lost in the commission of the crime, and B, there should be a way around it. And part of that is don't put your DNA on record. Don't do it. Don't send in the DNA sample. Make them work a little harder for that information. Once it's on record, it's never going away. It's there. And it's there for your children and your children's children. Now, in an ideal society where unjust laws are easily defied and easily fixed, in an ideal society where most of us are working for the betterment, that DNA record is actually extremely useful when it comes to a variety of things, such as finding lost children, reuniting adopted children and their birth mothers, connecting families that have disconnected. There's a lot of useful purposes. So I'm praying for that positive future where all this science and technology continues to enhance us the way it says it will, and where we take up pens, we take up typewriter keys. Well, we take up our keyboards and we write letters and we print them off on printers and we send them via snail mail to communicate freely, directly, and clearly with our politicians and keep control of our governments. And our governments don't get controlled by multinationals and outsiders to the degree that we're forced to defy a host of unjust laws. So that's my half an hour. I've been talking for a whole half hour. Nobody logged on. That's all right. You can watch this later. I'm sure you did. And thank you for watching. And I hope I stirred your brain cells. Because you see, when you blow somebody's mind, you open it. I want to walk into your brain, plant a bomb, and explode it. Because a blown mind is an open one. Blow your mind today. All right. I'm trying to go like right to the exact 30 minutes, but that's really silly. Now, how do I stop it? There's no pause, play, start, stop button on here. If I click the X, what does it do?